It's a beautiful Sunday afternoon in the summer, and Nettie Merrill leaves a pool party at his friends, the Westerhazys, to swim home. He enters people's backyards and swims across their pools. During the first part of his journey, he's greeted happily and served alcohol, but after almost 4 miles halfway into his journey, a threatening storm breaks. Suddenly, the trees seem to be losing red and yellow leaves. He crosses a busy divided highway on bare feet in his swimsuit as cars honk and passengers ridicule him, then swims across the murky, crowded public pool. His friends, the Hallorans, commiserate with him on his misfortunes, having to sell his house, his poor children. Nettie is confused but doesn't ask for clarification. He is cold and tired and the leaves are falling. Neither does he understand when the Saxes refer to an operation 3 years ago. He's called a gate crasher at the Biswangers, and his former mistress, Shirley Adams, refuses to give him a drink. On arriving at his own home, he finds it dark and derelict. The plot line that structures this story is the hero's quest. We read on page 158, down at the end of the last full paragraph on the page. He was not a practical joker, nor was he a fool, but he was determinedly original and had a vague and modest idea of himself as a legendary figure. And then on page 159, at the end of the paragraph where he leaves the party, making his way home by an uncommon route gave him the feeling that he was a pilgrim, an explorer, a man with a destiny. So there's this quest that he has to swim home through people's swimming pools. In a typical story with this plot, the hero encounters obstacles along the way, and in challenging himself and overcoming these obstacles, he is able to emerge with new power, new wisdom, new prestige. This isn't the case with Nettie. On page 161, when he is trying to cross the divided highway, toward the end of that page, he had signed nothing, vowed nothing, pledged nothing, not even to himself. Why was he unable to turn back? It's almost as if this plot line is holding him prisoner. Why was he determined to complete his journey, even if it meant putting his life in danger? At what point had this prank, this joke, this piece of horseplay become serious? He could not go back. Of course, when he arrives at the end, he discovers something other than the traditional hero's renewal of power and wisdom. The characterization of Nettie is interesting. Obviously, he consumes a lot of alcohol. He seems to be self-satisfied but immature. On page 158, the narrator tells us in the second paragraph, while he was far from young, he had slid down his banister that morning and given the bronze backside of Aphrodite on the hall table a smack, something that a kid would do. On page 165, when he tells his former mistress what he's up to, her question is, "Will you ever grow up?" She feels that his embrace of this quest is a hallmark of his immaturity. He's very self-satisfied and takes a great deal of pleasure in his life. Page 159, that he lived in a world so generously supplied with water seemed like a clemency, a beneficence. His heart was high. He also comes across on page 159 as considerate. When Mrs. Graham greets him warmly at the middle of the page, he saw then, like any explorer, that the hospitable customs and traditions of the natives would have to be handled with diplomacy. He did not want to mystify or seem rude to the Grahams, nor did he have time to linger there. So he is thoughtful. On page 162 and 163, when he gets to the home of his friends who happen to be nudists, he takes off his swimming trunks politely and swims through their pool in the nude, because that's the correct thing to do when you're at the nudist's household. In any case, he seems rather drama-loving. On page 160, he is delighted with the rainstorm. Toward the bottom of that page, why did he love storms? So he enjoys not just the simple, natural beauty of a summer day, but also the drama of a rainstorm. And then on page 165, when he's recollecting his romance with Shirley Adams, he thinks of her as, in the middle of the page, a mistress who had come to him on her knees and showered his trousers with tears. This might not be a memory that you would enjoy if you tend to care more about others' feelings than about the excitement of your life, but it's one of the things he likes to remember about the impression that he made on Shirley Adams. He's in denial about negative things in his life, and there are two quotes I want you to notice here. On page 161, right above that section break, was his memory failing, or had he so disciplined it in the repression of unpleasant facts that he had damaged his sense of the truth? And then on page 163, there's a reference to his gift for concealing painful facts. About 3/4 of the way down the page, the beginning of the next to the last full paragraph. He's very much aware of these social gradations in his little group. On page 162, he is hesitant to go into the public pool. At the middle of the page, he might contaminate himself, damage his own prosperousness and charm by swimming in this murk. So he's too good to swim in a public pool. And then on page 164, when he visits the Biswangers, he's quite aware, a third of the way down the page, they did not belong to Nettie's set. They were not even on Lucinda's Christmas card list. They are the kind of people who ask the optometrist, the veterinarian, the real estate dealer, the dentist. They're the kind of people who talk about how much things cost, all of these things that make him feel superior and make him think that they're below him. The tone is interesting here. Tone is the narrator's attitude toward the events and the persons in the story. It's created by word choice and other aspects of expression. The tone in this story is ironic and detached. On page 158, there's a quote from Shakespeare here at the middle of the page. He might have been compared to a summer's day, particularly the last hours of one. So some of you remember from when you took British literature in 12th grade, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Well, he might have been compared to a summer's day, particularly the final hours of one. And then on page 159, I'm just picking out two from the beginning, but you can find others. Down in the last paragraph, oh, how bonny and lush were the banks of the Lucinda River. This exclamation, and then the clarification of the way in which the banks are bonny and lush. Prosperous men and women gathered by the sapphire-colored waters, while caterers' men in white coats passed them cold gin. So bonny and lush banks of the Lucinda River sounds very poetic. It sounds Arcadian. It sounds like something that someone might sing in a song composed by Robert Burns in the 18th century. But what you've got here is an upper middle class or upper class society where people hire waiters and hand out alcohol by swimming pools. Just a disjunction in those two reference points that comes across to me as ironic. It's as if the narrator is making a little bit of fun of Nettie Merrill. The themes in this story, obviously Nettie Merrill loses much by the end of the story when he arrives home and his house is empty and falling apart. There's also a lot of self-deception going on here. He's inattentive to his loss as it's happening. And this is one of those things that you can think more about as you do your free write.